Good morning, everyone. I'm hopeful a presentation will appear, otherwise I'll tell the story of how I became a financial services expert. And it's a long story. It starts in 1981. So hopefully we'll have a presentation for you. Ah, excellent. Excellent. I'd like to build off the presentation done by the National Bank and highlight the impressive strides that have been made in Ukraine even since I've started working here about a year ago. So the road to a cashless economy is not going to be easy. It's not going to be straight. It's going to take a lot of work on everyone's part. But I think there is a strong commitment to move there. And like I said, based on the presentation this morning by the NBU, it seems like many good things are happening. Just to start out, the map shows the percentage of people around the world that have formal bank accounts. And to me, the cashless economy is closely linked to financial inclusion, which is a topic that's very important to me and a topic that I think is very important for the people of Ukraine. Based on the statistics we have, about 50% of adults in Ukraine have a formal bank account. Not the lowest in the world, but certainly not the highest. I talked a little bit about financial inclusion and want to give you a quick story about the unbanked in the United States. So it's expensive to be poor in the United States. Most people in the US who do not have bank accounts are paid by check. And so you receive your paycheck once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, and then you need to do something with it. And so for the poor and the unbanked, they go to check cashing facilities, and they're charged a fee to cash their check. And so you've already taken a small paycheck, and now you've reduced it by about 5%. So now they have cash. So they can do many things with cash in the US, but they still need to pay their rent and pay their electric bill, or make a car payment, or do all the normal things that we do each month in our lives. And so in the US, they now need to take the cash and turn it back into a digital form. They need to either go to a bill-paying center, or they need to buy a money order that they can then mail to the service provider. And so the poor pay twice. When I get paid, it is automatically placed into my bank account, and my bills are automatically direct debited from my account, and I don't pay any fees. And so in many ways, it's not very fair. Additionally, when the poor need credit, when the unbanked need credit, where do they go? They go to Payday Lenders. I think there are some of those here in Ukraine. I've only seen about 1,000 of them as I walk down the streets in Kiev. And so in the US, the average loan amount is about $350, and the loan lasts about 2 weeks. Annual interest rate is 300+%, so lower than here in Ukraine, but still a substantial amount. And the statistics I have say that the average person who uses these types of services will get 10 loans a year. Again, the cost of being poor is quite high. I think the NBU did a much better job in presenting the most current statistics on cashless transactions in Ukraine. I just want to put a slide here that just shows a quick comparison of where Ukraine stands to some other countries. And I'll get to why I think it's important in a moment. Again, another measure of how cashless you are is the ratio of M0 to GDP. Again, Sweden seems to be the gold standard in cashless, and as you can see, Ukraine still high. It is lower than in this slide, but still important. And I think we've already gone through some of the reasons why the level is not as good as it could be. Some of it is infrastructure-based, some of it is regulatory-based, some of it is cultural. So a range of reasons, but the reality is still that Ukraine is not where it should be. And here's why I think it's important. If you look at this chart, the line shows the relationship between cashless transactions and the shadow economy or the gray economy. And the data shows that the more cashless transactions you have, the smaller your gray economy is going to be. And as you can see, Ukraine has a ways to go to move down toward the good end of the chart. And so I think we all agree that reducing the size of this gray economy is a worthwhile goal, and one of the ways that this can be done is through cashless transactions and promoting cashless transactions. So this is kind of the motherhood and apple pie reasons why digital payments are good. There is cost savings. I've shown from the US example that digital transactions cost less than cash. They cost less for the people who are paying, and they cost less for the people that are being paid. Transparency. A little bit later in the presentation, I'll give you some examples of where digital payments really had an immediate impact on transparency. There's speed and security. The payments are instant. They are safer in many ways than a cash transaction. And financial inclusion. In many places, the use of digital payments, particularly government-to-citizen payments, are a springboard into financial inclusion. And finally, economic development. There is data that shows that as you increase the amount of digital transactions, there is an actual increase in GDP. So the key here, I think, is that digital payments will often reduce leakage and reduce the amount of corruption that's associated with a payment. And so digitizing payments for government fees and fines is a great starting point. It is important for financial inclusion. We've seen efficiencies in tax payments, and also when salary payments and other types of social welfare payments are digital, again, we see efficiencies. And so many governments are shifting toward that and moving toward a digital payment environment. The Philippines took an early step in this, and so their digitization of government payments had an immediate impact and was a key part of their anti-corruption drive. The Prime Minister of Peru said that digital payments were a way to include the poor and the unbanked in the formal economy. And as we know, reducing tax losses through untraceable cash transactions is an important element of what's taking place in the European Union. But it is not an easy road, as I mentioned. Our project did a survey on some of the attitudes toward digital payments in April of 2017. And what we found was, rightly or wrongly, there's some reluctance to digitization. They cited the high commission fees. I think some of the perception that fees are high is based on the fact that you don't fully understand the cost of cash. If you're waiting in a queue for several hours to make a cash payment, you don't really count that cost, but there is a cost to that. There was security concerns that were cited, that digital payments were not secure. There was fear of making an online payment, fear of fraudulent payments at POS, and so there was concerns there. The lack of paper receipts. Many transactions still require a paper proof that the transaction took place. And so there was some traditional concerns with regard to the lack of paper that was associated with a digital transaction. Habit. It takes a while to change the way you do business, and if you're used to carrying cash and if you're used to making cash payments, moving to digital takes some time. And finally, the underdeveloped infrastructure. The NBU presentation talked about the rise in POS terminals, but POS penetration in Ukraine is still lower than it should be based on its national income and level of development. So different countries are trying different things to address some of the issues. We talked a little bit this morning about remote identification and some of the know your customer requirements that banks have. In Mexico, they are using a tiered approach to know your customer, where different types of accounts require a different level of identification, a different level of documentation, and so they are able to better match the type of transaction that an individual is doing to the restrictiveness of the KYC rules. In Brazil, they are using some non-bank payments to use direct-to-savings account types of transactions, with a number of commercial banks partnering to make these types of transactions more simple. We all love this slide, and so that's why we continue to use it. What I'd like to highlight here is that our program, and I think part of the work that we are doing with the NBU, is going to focus on the government to citizen and citizen to government focus. I think those two areas will do the most to promote financial inclusion and do the most to impact the shadow economy. And so this is an area where a focused effort can be made by the government, by the NBU, and by projects like ours, and work in conjunction with the private sector to make sure that digital payments expand more broadly. Some classic examples of C2G and G2C payments. In Estonia, another gold standard of digitization, there is a secure digital ID in Estonia that everyone has, that's issued at birth and then can be used for a variety of things. So in Estonia, there's a unified system, a single government portal, and a centralized payment structure. This enables you to do almost anything electronically, and any interaction with the government, either being paid or paying, can be done through a single mechanism. In Tanzania, not the most advanced country, but an interesting example, they required that all payments made for entering game parks or any government-run tourist attractions be done digitally. And when this was instituted, what do you think happened? The government receipts from tourism expanded about 20 to 25%. Were more tourists coming to Tanzania? No. But the government was getting all the money now that it was direct digital payments to the government, as opposed to handing cash to the representative at the game park. So an instant benefit to the government and an instant reduction in corruption. In Peru, they're trying something where the government is actively developing its own payment system that will be interoperable, will work on a mobile platform, and will be used to secure government payments both to the government and back to citizens. And so here's an approach where the government is working with the private sector, but that they are leading kind of the payment infrastructure development. In Jordan, also a national payment platform is being developed, and in this case, they're working on the issue of invoicing and developing kind of a universal bill that is standardized and can be accepted and read by all of the financial institutions so that the payments are facilitated. And finally, in Rwanda, again, not the most advanced country, but a government portal and payment service that enables citizens to engage in over 50 e-services from 10 government agencies where payments can be made directly through a variety of channels. And so they let mobile payments, they let bank payments, they let kiosk-based payments all be made through this portal. And so to reiterate what was said earlier, what I think is needed in Ukraine to facilitate and expand the amount of payments is some standardized invoicing, some liberalization on the direct debit legislation, remote identification, real-time confirmation of payments. Nothing makes you happier than when you use a digital system for the first time, as I did when I was paying a parking ticket in Washington, D.C., and as soon as I hit send, I got an email back from the Washington, D.C. Police Department that says, "Thank you, we have received your payment." And so confirmation builds trust in the system. And the last two that I want to talk about is incentives for making digital payments. There is a need to push people to make a change. What they've done in the US and in other countries, as an example, is when I register my automobile, I am no longer able to pay cash. In fact, I'm really no longer able to go to the office and pay. They require that I make my payment digitally. If for some reason I can't, and I do go to the office, I pay 5% more for the service than I would if I made the payment digitally. So it was a disincentive to not pay digitally, and it made me change my behavior. I'd like to leave you all this morning with an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I think everyone in this room has a stake in ensuring that the cashless economy in Ukraine thrives. And so to do that, I think that both government, industry, and the donors involved all need to work together so that we can go far, not just fast. Thank you for your attention.